All right, okay, let's get started. So just before we start, a couple of ground rules since we're going to be having kind of a discussion. First off, I'm going to be talking for about 30 minutes. So if you could hold all your questions and comments and whatnot to the end, just so we can get through the material, that would be great. And when it does come time for the discussion period, please leave politics out and be respectful and courteous and whatnot. And if we're not exclusive to just Zoroastrian, so I can't say for certain, but if you're whatever background you're from, whatever level of interest, that's fine. Just respect everybody and everything. So the purpose of this meeting is this is kind of our first Zoom meeting in a long time. It's definitely the first one that I've done. So we wanted to kind of give a comprehensive overview of Zarathustra's teachings. I didn't know where a lot of people were coming from, and I've also been kind of working through my own perspective of Zoroastrianism different before, which is why I kind of wanted to give this teaching and explain everything in detail. This is more based from a philosophical perspective and viewpoint, and it's based on Zarathustra's unique teachings. It's not too much based on anything outside of that. And I also wanted to say this is my own personal perspective. If you see things differently, if you disagree, that's okay. I just wanted to explain things as how I see them. So just a little bit of background on the Zarathustrian Assembly before we get started. The Zarathustrian Assembly was founded in 1990 as an organization where people could discuss the Gathas and the teachings of Zarathustra in detail, how he put them down. It's meant to bring everybody together in this way where we can all discuss, Zarathustra's teachings. We do virtual and not at the moment, but we're also hoping to do in-person meetings soon once we have a location, but we do virtual in-person meetings. We also sponsor and produce a lot of education on Zoroastrianism. One of our goals is to educate people who either know a little bit or don't know anything about it to try to get the word out there. So that is a Zarathustrian Assembly. You can visit our website to learn a lot more, and we're hopefully going to have this presentation and much other material available on there. Okay, so let's get started. Who was Zarathustra? Now, this is a hard question to exactly deal with, but things we know for certain, mainly from his own words, is his name was Zarathushtra Spatama from Haichataspana, some sort of clan or large group of Iranians. He lived probably in Central Asia around 1500 BC, probably around Tajikistan or Turkmenistan, that general area. It's hard to exactly say. What we do know is that he was an Iranian who lived before the time of agriculture. And this kind of nails it down as far as archaeology is concerned. You have I'm not going to get too in detail into this. If you're curious, ask me later, but there's these different Iranian cultures, archaeological cultures that we can date back to this area around 1500 BC. What we also know is that it was a Bronze Age herding society. They rode chariots, they engaged in warfare, they also herded animals and would often mine for minerals and make weapons and whatnot, but they didn't settle in a single place. They weren't, moving from town to town every week, but they'd settle in one area for a time period. Then when the weather got worse, they would move to a better climate and they would herd animals. Mainly large cattle and smaller animals like goats and whatnot, as well as large packs of horses that they would use for chariot warfare, which Zarathustra specifically mentions a few times. They also, and it's uncertain exactly to what level, but they also engaged in the worship of Daiwas, or often kind of referred to as Daivas. These were analogous with the early Rig Veda, the early Hindu devas, which were a set of gods, usually kind of symbolic of the natural world or different kind of virtues. And this is what they worship. They had a set of number of rituals, and this religion, at least according to Zarathustra, was rather oppressive. It sponsored a lot of raiding and pillaging and kind of really force people to put their minds into. Could I ask everybody to mute their mics when they come in, please? Thank you. They kind of, in short, it was a very oppressive, very backwards religion. Okay, so who was he and what he produced? He was first and foremost a philosopher. His goal was to teach people how to think correctly and how to improve themselves in the world around them. And more importantly, he crafted a philosophical viewpoint or system in which he taught to people, which we refer to as Daina Wangri, literally the good envisionment or worldview. And this seemed to be the core of his teachings, was to get people to envision how the world worked and how things worked in a way that was good, and oriented towards the good. He was also a poet, a mantra maker in specific, who crafted, as I mentioned before, he crafted the Gathas, which are the set of poems. Okay, so the Gathas, they're not quite like reading anything else that we're used to in the modern day. He doesn't explain ideas in detail. He doesn't tell you exactly what to think or how to feel. Instead, it's this highly complex set of poetry that gives you these ideas that you're meant to dwell on and carry with you. I've often personally experienced that you read the Gathas, you understand what he's saying, but as you dwell on them, these things seem to pop up, and you start to understand more and more what he's saying when you try to apply it to your own life. And specifically, their mantras, which is literally means kind of a thought tool or thought provoker, meant to develop your own understanding and perspective of the world. They're also called haitis. This one's a little complicated, so I'm not going to go into too detail, but they are highly encrypted, sequentially self-referential poems. What this means is they were designed with ring composition, so that each stanza of a song will correspond with another stanza, and then each song will also correspond with another song. So the takeaway here is they are extremely complex. Every song self-references another song in a sequential order. But what's important to remember is they are poetry and they are thought-provoking. They're meant to provide wisdom. So if you read them and you're not being told exactly what to think, you're instead being given a way to uncover the world. So I've determined 5 key themes of Zarathustra's philosophy or of the Gathas. And then this will take up the rest of the discussion going over these. The first is the correct understanding of existence. There's dualistic paradigms, so kind of duals such like hot and cold, dark and light, but specifically mind, body, ethical, and cosmological. There's the nature of the divine, the role of humanity, and the continual act of creation and perfection of existence. So the correct understanding of existence. This, I think, more than anything else, is the core of Zoroastrianism. And I think it's an excellent place as a starting point, because it also, I believe, was a starting point for Zarathustra and is a starting point for each and every one of us. If we're not only to be good Zoroastrians, but also to correctly understand Zarathustra's teachings and to correctly apply them to the world, we must start with the correct understanding of existence. But more importantly, I think this is where Zarathustra started. I think he was a very inquisitive person who sought to understand how the world truly was, and this is where everything else led to. And what I've determined is that he realized there was a set of foundational or fundamental truths about existence. And here they are here. The first is that there is an underlying order which governs how existence works. This is referred to as asha, literally how things have been ordered or how things have been fit into place. At our modern day, we often kind of colloquially talk about this as the laws of science, the laws of physics, or whatnot. You'll often hear asha described as truth or righteousness or whatnot, but these are all abstractions. The actual meaning of the word is the exact way in which existence is ordered. It's a set of laws or whatnot. More so than this, there's a set of impulses or forces by which existence or things develop, according to Shah, or against it. But specifically, you notice that there is impulses and forces. A good kind of way of thinking about this, if we're going to stick with science, is in evolution. Um, Things evolve according to the laws of science, but a lot of people still haven't been able to nail down exactly what's causing things to evolve, for instance. What we do know is that evolution is a set of filters, but what is pushing them through that? So what Zarathustra understood is that ultimately there's this underlying order with these forces or potentialities. He also determined, and I think in the right here, is that life is inherently good, and so are humans. That the world, that existence is good, yet evil still exists somehow. There's this sort of paradigm where there's good, things are ultimately good, yet somehow wrong and evil still exists. Um, I think the two other things that he kind of realized before he started to truly understand the world is that people often fail to understand existence correctly. Um, they're either given, growing up, worldviews that mislead them about it, or otherwise go through some pain, and they'll craft or determine an incorrect way of viewing the world, which then will cause them to do wrong. Yet, even though a lot of wrong is caused by humans, either indirectly or directly, evil still exists in the natural world to some extent, mainly from imperfectly ordered natural systems. And what I mean by that is, for instance, disease coming about from particular particular organisms which prey off of a host rather than living in natural harmony with them, like the rest of, for instance, our gut bacteria. And this leads to conflict and abrasion. There's a lot of other examples. For instance, incorrectly or inharmonious, for instance, I just had a hurricane come through here recently. If you don't have a planet whose kind of weather systems are stable, it will often lead to extreme weather events and whatnot. And this is stuff that could theoretically be iteratively, eliminated. But at this current state of the world, there's a lot of conflict and abrasion. So the next point is dualism. In particular, I've noticed there's three kinds of dualistic paradigms in the Gathas. Of course, there's other paradigms in later Zoroastrian work, but this is the core of it. First is Asha versus Druj. Asha, like I mentioned, is the laws which order existence, the fundamental laws. And what must be understood is these are inherently good. This is what the Ashembuhu tells us, that the laws which order existence are good, yet they're not perfectly realized. There's a conflict here between Asha versus Druj. Druj can be understood as a lie or deceit, but what it really is anything that arises from the laws of existence not being perfectly realized in existence, or people's incorrect understanding of it. For instance, I mentioned a minute ago about people incorrectly understanding existence. This comes from them not doing the work they need to properly understand Asha. There's also Spinta Manu versus Angara Manu. These are potentials or forces, two forces. In the human, they represent these two potentials in the mind to either work towards the good or work against it. And in the outside world and existence, they represent the forces or the potentialities for existence to develop in certain ways. Now, ultimately, the dualism, and this is why I'm not explaining these two concepts in depth at the moment, is it's mind and body dualism. One thing I've noticed very recently is I think this is the strongest, most potent underlying theme of the Gathas that isn't immediately apparent. Yet when you start to apply it or start to really think about these ideas, it shows up in all the other terms Zarathustra uses. So there are two realms of existence, and this is how Zarathustra describes it in Yasna 28:2. There is the mind and body in the human. And this is analogous to energy and matter in the outside world. And in particular, there's also the mind you realm or the mental realm. I use mind you because that's a term used in the later Avesta, particularly if you ever see something translated as heavenly in some of the old translations, you can probably just understand that as mental. But what should be understood here is that the universe is analogous to the human experience. As I have here, the human is a microcosm of the universe. And I think this is the ultimate understanding from which everything else comes from, that the experience of a human, of a mind joining with a body, is akin to this realm of energy or matter joining with the universe. In particular, it can be understood as, in the human, this is the mind, this is how we are driven, because without a mind, the human body can ultimately do nothing. It's both generated by the brain, but also directs the brain, and that's exactly how the universe is. In the ultimate scheme of things, the universe has this realm of energy or potentiality which drives all matter and gives it purpose and substance. And this leads us to our next point, the nature of the divine. Now, this one I'm honestly still not entirely certain about, so I'm going to explain my perspective as I understand it. But I believe my own thinking may change in the future. In particular, Zarathustra describes the divine as Mazda and Ahura, and particularly Mazda Ahura, which can be translated ultimately or alternately as the wise Lord or divine wisdom being my personal preference. As I mentioned before, with the universe being split between these two realms of energy and matter, mind and body, Ahura Mazda can be best understood as the supreme intellect or the mind that is being placed onto the body, which is this universe. I wouldn't take that too literally. It's a little bit more metaphorical. So I best understand it as the supreme intellect of the energy spread throughout the universe, which is why fire is so important in Zoroastrianism, as it's a direct representation of the hand of Ahura Mazda, almost. Most importantly, in the Gathas, he's never described as specifically creating the universe or crafting it, or even crafting Asha. He's instead described as the father of Asha, which I think is best to understand it as Asha being giving birth to, or being given birth to from Ahura Mazda, coming out from his own good nature. And specifically, Ahura Mazda operates through Spenta Mainyu, the progressive force or progressive mental potentiality, which is this iterative force by which things slowly grow and progress in the good and the better. Specifically, you can understand it as Ahura Mazda being the source of creation, and Spenta Mainyu being the potentiality to, or the force which iteratively creates things according to Asha and makes it. Also, there are 7 emanations of Ahura Mazda in existence, or maybe more than 7, but 7 definitely in later tradition. More importantly, or alternately, he's also, or it is also obtainable by the living. This is something that I think is very important, is because this nature of Ahura Mazda is not like God in Christianity, this is something that we can directly experience. I've noticed personally that there's at least 3 different ways, probably more, but 3 different ways we can directly experience this. For instance, if you're trying to understand a situation, if you're in some sort of mental peril, or anything like that, you're trying to figure out something, there will be these times, and I think everybody has experienced this, when suddenly you'll get the snap and you'll view the entire situation as it is. You'll see it from beginning to the end, and you'll understand exactly how things are. I think this is an experience of this divine wisdom in the self. But that's obviously not enough. You also have to do the hard work in making yourself better, um, which is where the Amesha Spentas come through. By seeking to attain the divine within yourself and to work through these 7 key components, you can iteratively progress yourself and make yourself wiser and more able to understand existence. Also, Mazda can be generated or sustained in the physical world by human actions and by making things the best possible versions of themselves. For instance, in a family, you can, in your family, let's say, for example, if you raise your family right, you show them love and affection and care, you can raise people who are, according to Ashad, the best versions of themselves that they can be. And through this process, Ahura Mazda can almost be generated in a metaphorical sense or sustained. So when people, friends, family come into the house and they stay, they can, end up having a very wonderful experience, but particularly given this sense of ushta and this sense of love and radiant happiness. And more importantly, they can be understood. It's hard to explain, but that's the best way I can understand it. But still, it ultimately should understand that Ahura Mazda is the creator of existence, even if it's through intermediary ways of understanding it. It's still the source and creator of existence. And this is a good point, saying the next key term is the role of humanity. What exactly is our purpose? And as you'll see, I think the appearance of humanity is the greatest turning point of this universe, of the existence in which we live. As I mentioned before, we are a microcosm of the universe, of these grand themes and designs that have been going for billions of years. And in our own selves, we mimic the themes going on in the universe. And because of this, just like the existence itself, we have the ability and the potential to understand and to direct our actions. And more importantly, as I mentioned, the universe is an iterative progression towards the better, but an iterative progression and evolution. And over all these billions of years of thousands of iterations, we are the outcome of this. We're the first instance that we know of beings that are, like I said, are self-aware and can direct their actions. And I think this is ultimately very important because we have this ability. We can understand, we can change our actions. And with this ability, we also have responsibilities. We have a responsibility to correctly understand existence, to understand how things are operating and how things actually are. And more importantly than this, we also have the responsibility to actualize the divine in ourselves. Obviously, not every human is aware of this, but any person who seeks to be the best version of themselves that they can be, to be wise, to have the power in their lives where they need to, is doing the same thing. It's not really hidden knowledge. Obviously, the teachings of Zarathustra, I believe, would lead people to understanding things better, but this is all stuff that anybody could come to if they're only dedicated enough to wisdom and understanding. And most importantly, because of this, we have a responsibility to do good, to make the world a better place and work in harmony with this progressing good in existence, with Spenta Manu, this progressive force, which is iterating the universe to its best state. Now, this leads us to our final point, Frasho Kariti, the final end. I should have probably put that in quotes because there's no end to it, really, although it can be understood that in a sense. And that's the perfection of all existence. But it only makes sense if you understand the continual act of creation. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier because this is so critical to all these ideas, but nothing happens immediately. This is something I love about Zoroastrianism and Zarathustra's teachings. There's nothing that supersedes what one can understand about the world just by their own understanding of it. So nothing happens immediately. We know this. Everything must be worked towards. Any good, any change that happens must be worked towards. So the ultimate story of creation is the same. In short, the act of creation is still in process. Wasn't an immediate one and done situation. And because of this, the universe is slowly over time increasing and iterating in the good and the better. And because of this, everything is fundamentally good. Everything is good simply by the act of existing. It might have parts of it that are wrong or harmful or destructive, but just by existing, it is good. And this is what Zarathustra means when he says in Yasna 44, I forget the stanza, that Ahura Mazda created everything through the progressive mental force. Everything is good just on different levels of progression. And by this same extension, humans are fundamentally good as well. Besides us being misled, besides our problems, besides any of this stuff, we are still good and we are fundamentally good. And it's up to us as to whether we will develop that further or let it flounder or even be regressed. What's important to note is that this continual act of creation will eventually end and eventually come to a stopping point, which leads us to the perfection of existence. This continual iteration in the good, this progression towards the best state, is kind of the theme of all of it. The theme of all of Zoroastrianism. It's the ultimate endpoint that we are heading towards. If you notice just in your own life, if you're somebody who's dedicated towards making things better, as you get older, as you work towards more things, you hopefully, not always, notice that you're a much better person than you started off with. And if you're lucky enough to have good, loving, and beneficial parents, you'll notice that you might be better off than your parents, disregarding outside events. And this is the theme of the whole universe. And this leads us to Frashokrati, the continual act of making things new. It's often described, I was even guilty of it in my title slide for this, as the final end, but it's a continual act of making things fresh and new. And that might even kind of tell us what the ultimate end will be like. It might, or the ultimate state of existence, I should say, might be this continual act of making things new. That if we ever stop trying to make things new and make things progress, that things could start to regress. And as I said, ultimately, the universe will be made into, as Zarathustra calls it, the best existence, according to the laws which order it. Now, I have here kind of a set of questions or pondering points about this, because I'm honestly probably as stumped on this as anybody else. Like, what exactly will this best existence be like? And I think this is something that I certainly don't know well enough, and I don't even think we can truly answer, although maybe we can. I've never liked that sort of sentiment, but I have a couple ideas as to what it might be like, and I think this is what would be best to leave us on this sort of question. The first is that the nature of Asha is to kind of diversify outward, as Dina McIntyre describes it, in a kaleidoscopic pattern. As we've noticed, as the universe has progressed, it started from a very simple state, and then as things have gone on, the world continues to become more and more diverse. Human society does as well. And while this isn't always towards the good, if it's harnessed well, it always will be. So I think what this best existence would be like is something which is extremely complex and diverse and continually reiterating itself. It's not a solid endpoint where everything ends and is frozen in time. It's it's a continual process. It's a continual reiteration, and new things are constantly happening. Um, and I think this is the importance of frashokurti. It's a process, not an event. It's an act of making things new continually. And because of this, I think that the best existence would be exciting, fresh, and enjoyable. It would be, I don't know if adventure is the right word, but I can't imagine the universe becoming its best state and everybody being bored all the time. That's my ultimate point with that. Um, and what must be kind of remembered is that there's going to be no conflict or abrasion. And I know that's a little bit of a contradiction to what I just said, but there would be no conflict, abrasion, no death, injury, or destruction. I just can't imagine a perfect universe that would be that way. And more importantly, I believe all life, all existence will exist in total harmony, everything intricately fitting together, and they will be in their ultimate iterations, their best possible existences. Okay. And on that very complex note, that is the end of my discussion. So I wanted to thank you all for joining. This was my first Zoom presentation. So hope you all enjoyed. And if you have any questions for me, feel free, but I also kind of want to have this be an open discussion as well for the next 25, 30 minutes. So yes.
I think you did a great job, Caleb. You really covered a lot of the basics, and it was good to hear you get Dina McIntyre's name in there, because I studied with her, and there are very few more brilliant or good-hearted people than Dina McIntyre.
Yes, I agree. She's wonderful, and she was very helpful for me about 3 years ago when I was first trying to connect with the Zoroastrians. I'm curious, does anybody have any questions about anything that I brought up in particular? Any points or whatnot?
Caleb, do you want to stop sharing so we can see everybody?
Oh, right. Yeah, I totally forgot. Let's do that. Nice. All right. There we go.
Better.
Okay, so I see a question from Ali Vosukrad. In the Gathas, okay, let me read his question first. He says, how do you get to the perfection without Saoshyant? In the Gathas, a Saoshyant is not a particular person, or at least it doesn't seem that way. I believe in what the word literally means is somebody who would make the world grow or benefit in the future. Those two meanings are kind of congruent. So I think the Saoshyant or a Saoshyant can be anybody who comes in the future and renovates the world or helps to renovate it, And I think we can kind of look back in the past and see a number of them, of these different people who kind of revolutionized the world. I'm drawing blanks on influential figures, but I'm sure you can kind of look back in the past history, like, I don't know, Cyrus, or they kind of keep things Iranian, or I don't know, maybe George Washington isn't a great example. But in the Avesta, there was never one Saoshyant. They had a couple. I remember two. One is Asfat Irta, which just means truth materialized. Another was, I think it was Ukshiat Irta, who would grow truth. I don't know when it became a single person, but initially it was supposed to be multiple people. And I think it became a single person when they had this idea of the 3,000-year time cycle, that at the end of the 3,000 years, there'd be a Saoshyant. But before that, it was a very general idea. You got to remember that Zarathustra came, was as far away from the Sassanid period as we are from Jesus Christ or the Sassanid period, It's just as far of a distance, and it's a time for different ideas to change. So yeah, Zoroastrian could be understood as anybody who works towards the betterment of the world, who revolutionizes things. And I don't think it needs to be this massive figure. I think it can just be somebody minor. Any other questions or anything? If you're interested about what I was mentioning about Hietes and the poetic composition of the Gathas, there's a lot of works by Professor Schwartz, Martin Schwartz. That's kind of his life work, is showing how interrelated the Gathas are. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat here. I can't think of any exact articles off the top of my head. If you email ask@zoroastrian.org, you should be able to see, or should be able to see, sorry. You should be able to send me or send us an email, and I can get you the exact articles or whatnot, if you're interested in that topic.
I think somebody's phone is not muted and we can hear.
Thank you, Rebecca John.
Yeah, somebody.
Okay. Okay, Gerard asks, is the Kushti necessary? No, I'm going off of Dr. Jaffrey's work here, but originally the Kushti was something that would be worn over an overcoat by Iranians. So the reason why it was so important, it would be kind of like going out of the house with your like, for instance, my button up completely unbuttoned. It would just be very improper to be running around with your coat, you know, just flapping open. And he points to different engravings at Persepolis and whatnot of Iranians, which are depicted with that Kushti going on overwards. But if you notice in the Gathas, or at least in my presentation, there's not an emphasis on do this, don't do that. It's all about how things are to be correctly understood. If the Kushti works for you and you enjoy it and it feels like a connection, and I often wear it just because I like that experience, then I think it's important. But I think getting attached to things like that and that way of even of relating to religion or your, you know, your envisionment, or Dinah, as Zarathushtra would have described it, is the incorrect way to go. Because this is not about should I do this, should I do that. It's more about enlightening and developing the self.
I got a point on that. I do it with my belt. That's what I consider my kushti, since that's what I do every day. And when you put on your belt, at least for guys, you know, that's when you're getting ready to go outside, and yeah, that's, you can go outside without a lot of things, but you usually need a belt. And you can
Traditionally, we had that too, Steve, just like the belt that you guys have. Traditionally, the villagers in Iran always have a little like a band around their waist, and you know, so I think it's come from there, that many hundreds of years they had that thing around them. You know, if you look at the traditional Kurdish dress of men, always have something around their waist. And
yeah. But I love the idea of when you're putting it on, you're getting ready for the day, and you think of the day, and it really, if we want to get into this idea of we're trying to make ourselves and the world better, yeah, that kind of starts putting on the belt.
Yes, it's the belt and the Kurdish villagers. Those are great examples. Gerard also asked about the Navjot. Is it mentioned by Zarathushtra? I've never had opportunity here. No, it's a much later term, but no, he doesn't mention anything like that, and he doesn't refer to it. In fact, we don't have the surviving Avestan works to describe things like the Kushti and other things that much, but it shows up in very late works. But no, it's not all that It's definitely not in the Gathas. Maybe they wore those belts around them, but I think he had more important things to worry about than telling people to put their belts on and whatnot. Although, maybe if you'd asked him, he would think it would be an important thing. I have no idea. But what I think, as Steve was mentioning, is important here is that it's symbolic of going out into the world and kind of getting yourself ready. It's almost like tying a tie or whatnot if you're in the early 1900s. As things change, the world changes and our priority changes. But what doesn't change is this idea of getting out there and getting ready and mentally and physically preparing yourself and taking responsibility for your own actions in the world outside of you.
For those of you who speak Persian, you know the expression kamar bastan, and that's coming from there. Literally means tying your waist. And that, it comes from that you go and do and try to do something. You tie your, belt and you go and do to the world, so to speak.
I guess the ritual is more important, just to remind yourself, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. To remind yourself that's more important than tying the belts itself.
Yes, that's a great point. Ultimately, the point of all rituals, and I want to, in the future, write some sort of article about Zoroastrian rituals and why they're important and where they come from, because people often emphasize their rituals for the sake of rituals and not for other things. For instance, the praying 5 times a day is to kind of be an honoring of the natural process of the world, of the sun rising at different points, and it's symbolic of the day, and you're honoring and venerating the world. But if you don't know that, you're just doing it because you're told to. Ali asks, did you talk about Adam and Eve, Abrahamic vision and mission versus Zoroastrian point of view? The point of this talk wasn't a comparative religion between Christianity or Abrahamic religions and Zoroastrianism, but I can go ahead and speak on this. The Zoroastrian view of creation is not this initially perfect thing where humans happen to bite an apple and get knowledge and then get kicked out because they did this. It's much more broader. There's maybe an equivalent, but not in Zarathustra's teachings, which is kind of what I want to focus on today. If you're curious about that sort of thing, Maradan Farouk wrote the Shkan Gumanig, which is this treatise on different religions. And one of the things he covers is this exact story. And he found it very offensive and incredulous that that the creator of the universe would put this tree of knowledge and then punish his own creations for eating from it, and also act surprised that they ate from it if you're supposed to be all-knowing. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll go ahead and put that in here. And you can find it on Avesta.org.
Yeah, that's something I'm curious about. Is the relationship between humans and animals in nature, because in Judeo-Christian, it is like the baser separation. Humans are supposed to rise above, and it's kind of caused ripple effects in how extractive and separated we are, I think, from the natural world. I'm curious to hear how that works in Zoroastrianism.
I'm so glad you asked, because this is something I've actually thought a lot on. There is not this big divide between humans and animals, but it's not in the sense that, oh, we are actually animals, as a lot of people talk about it today. It's more so that we're all living creatures. There's nothing to look down on a cow or an animal. In fact, Zarathustra uses the term cow as a metaphor for all life, as almost a kind of the hypostasis of life itself. In particular, the only difference between us and animals is that, or other living beings, is that we can think and direct our actions and take responsibility for other things, versus animals don't have this opportunity. But when I look at the Gathas, he uses the term for mortal martia occasionally, but oftentimes he'll just use gaitha, which at the time just meant living. So he doesn't make the strong distinguishment between animals and people. And a lot of people in the Western world might find that, not to say the sentiment, but what I just said, slightly offensive or incredulous. But I think it's important to think of it that we're all living creatures. And when you look at a bird or a cow or anything, you can see such wonder and beauty there. I personally don't find any offense to just being similar to that. So that's my viewpoint. Oh, and later Zoroastrian tradition, everything, there's a giant primordial cow and everything got sprung out of it, but Zarathustra makes no allusions to it, so he probably thought the idea was a little silly. So Gerard asks, and also if you want to turn on your mic and ask something, definitely feel free, but I'm just going to read some questions from the chat. I noticed Daina Wangui, so is it a Shembuhu? Daina Wangui, and that just means good envisionment. That's the name that he chose for the religion. Religion, of course, not even being a good word. I think philosophy is better. And Daina literally comes from to see, and is all about how you envision the world. Is a term that fits very kind of neatly in with the term, at least how we use philosophy. A Shembuhu is a common prayer that we pray. That just reminds us that the way that the world is ordered is best, and that it brings radiant happiness, and that we are supposed to work in accord with it. It's often described as being righteous for the sake of righteousness, which is definitely a very good way of understanding it. Okay, and then to answer your next question, some people will get a little bit upset with me about this, but just like in Latin, the way that they write the V is pronounced a W. And if you know Dean W, it makes a lot more sense. Sorry, the Vestan script, it makes more sense because when you write a V, quote unquote, in the middle of a word, you write it as two U's, just like a W. But it's the same way, you know, people, Vini Vidi Vici was actually pronounced Winnie Vidi Vici. It's a same concept. But if you say Vahishtam, you know, that's fine. That's how it's pronounced now. I just study linguistics with this stuff, so I be a little bit more literal than maybe is needed. Okay, Ali says, looks like very first Zoroastrians or their ancestors most probably have Neanderthal DNA. I honestly, I don't know about this. Like I haven't studied. They came from the Proto-Indo-European tribes, which were in Ukraine like 3000 BC. Maybe they had contact with DNA, but I think that you'd have to do DNA studies on that sort of things, and I don't think you could tie it to Zoroastrians particular. You just have to do DNA studies on Iranians. Okay, and then Seema says that Dr. Jaffrey's oh, there we go. His 4th year of life celebration. Oh, I didn't even know that. I'm so glad that we were able to have this talk today. Yes. Gerard says, is pronunciation in prayers important, or is understanding most important? If you're curious about this, Yasna 19, well, actually through 21, but this covers in particular, they pretty much say both's important, but that this was a manual for priests, so don't take it too seriously. It's all we have left of this commentary on the Gathas called the Bagnask, which comes from Baga, meaning peace, and it was probably from originally Baga, meaning piece by piece. So it went through every stanza of the Gathas and kind of gave commentary on the correct pronunciation and the exact meaning of things. And then, but we only have the first 3 chapters, Yasna 19 to 21, which correspond with the 3 of the 4 main prayers. But to answer your actual question, the pronunciation is somewhat important, but the meaning is ultimately what's important, you know. Pronunciation, I would say, unless you're really into it, just pronounce it as feels natural. And what's important is you understand what it's saying. There's a certain kind of value to the rhythm of things. So as long as you're not adding extra syllables and whatnot, there you'll feel this sort of rhythmic effect with the prayer. But the actual pronunciation isn't important unless you want to be a correct, exact pronunciation. So the meaning is important, and that's what all this stuff is ultimately about, is understanding what these mantras are trying to provoke in your mind. So if you're pronouncing them correctly and you don't know what it's saying, you're just saying gibberish. So yes. Also, feel free to turn on your mics or whatnot. I know we're about to kind of wrap up here, but
Hey, Caleb, I have a question. So we had this back and forth with Dr. Jaffari, a lot of discussions about the concept of death and the concept of death in the Gathas. I want to take your view and your insight into that. What are your thoughts?
I left it out actually because I'm not certain. I can have an idea. I can mention things in the Gathas, but ultimately I haven't found a way where it all kind of wraps together. Like this talk today, I talked about all these different ideas where I saw them all kind of corresponding together. And I think Zarathustra obviously talked about it. He talks about the two Mainus when they first met, and they first, met's the best way to translate that. They first met, they created life and unlife, or not life. Death is probably a decent way to understand that, but not life gives you a broader idea. And then he also talks about Ahura Mazda establishing a good end for the righteous or the truthful, and a bad end for the wrongful. But what exactly he's referring to, especially with this metaphor of the Chinbat Bridge, I'm not exactly certain. What it does seem to apply is that, or seem to imply, is that when we die, we cross over metaphorically into some other type of existence. But I think if you think about the connection in this Mainu realm, there's no spiritualism in the Gathas. Spiritualism literally comes from, I think, Latin or Greek for breath. That's even in later Avesta, if you look at the actual words rather than how it's translated in Abrahamic sense, it's still this concept of this abstract mental realm. Even the Yazats or Yazatas exist as these mental potentials or whatnot, and as these forces and mental potentials. So to take this back to the concept of death, I think it somehow is related to that. Like whatever we have created of ourselves when we die gets carried on into this realm. Although I'm honestly not sure. I could give you an answer, but I don't want to give an answer because I haven't figured it out for myself. So I think that's the best I can say on that topic.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Steve says, I'm interested in Song 2 and the Soul of the Living World. Yeah, what's interesting about it is Soul of the Living World, Soul of Mother Earth, Soul of Creation is the best way to translate it. Literally is Gao or Gav in modern Persian. But it's a metaphor for all of life or existence. And that's not unknown to similar poetry from the Vedic Hinduism. Karpawala talks about that if you're interested. It's a very interesting metaphor because there's some interesting points to note. I can talk a while about it, but one thing that we know from it is that it cries out to all these emanations of God, and then it asks the creator of the world for something, and the creator of the world, the creator of a fashioner of the cow, I should say, sorry, asks the order of existence, as I don't really know how well, or I can't really find a good solution for the cow. And then when the creator of existence, which should be best understood not as Ahura Mazda but as Spenta Mainu, which the Gathas imply as well, when it asks Asha, the order of existence, what should be done, Ahura Mazda responds through the order of existence, which is one of a few areas in the Gathas where you can see this very complex view of creation, of the kind of creation account, why it's not so simple. And then you can also see why in later Zoroastrianism, when they lost that kind of complexity that that then became a direct kind of conflict between Ahura Mazda and Angkor Mainyu, which is a very oversimplification. But the last thing I want to say about it is the ultimate story of the song is that they realize that no direct hero is going to come, and that they instead need a judge or judgment, which a term here should be understood as kind of a solution to a problem, and somebody you can set down solutions that would make the situation right to come. And that's why Zarathustra, in this kind of story that he's telling, he's saying that I was chosen by Ahura Mazda to create this judgment or solution that can set existence right, or at least be the first person in a very many chains of persons that can tell existence. For him, it was to get Iranians to stop raiding and pillaging and slavery and all this, and to get them to not necessarily settle down. He doesn't actually say too much, at least I don't think you can argue that in the meaning of the word too much, but to get them to work together in harmony and to stop raiding and killing and pillaging each other just for short-term gain. So it's just about 2 o'clock. I think that's about all of our time. So if there's any other kind of comments or something people wanted to make over the mic, then we'll finish up. So.
I'm just noticing that you're Ashem Vidam from YouTube. So
oh, you just noticed that? Yeah.
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 Because it's my first
Thank
time
you.
on here. They're great
Yeah,
introductions.
Thank you.
I'm a subscriber anyway. I'm a subscriber.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you. I haven't had time to do any more work with my YouTube channel because I've taken more responsibility with the assembly, but hopefully I can put more up there soon. So
Caleb, why don't you put your in the chat box where we as a link, can you do that with your YouTube channel?
I can put my name in. This is it here. If you look that up, you'll find my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Since we're just ending up, I'd have to go on and copy the link and stuff. But if you type it into the search bar, you'll see my channel pop up right away. So
okay,
It's great. I would recommend.
thank you. Thank you.